morning, everybody. It's Dana Brigman, and today I have with me again Dr. Barb Fox. She's going to introduce herself in a little bit more detail and how you can reach her for consultations. But we're going to start talking today about vaccines and all the questions that people have about their effectiveness, when to vaccinate, when not to, and a whole bunch of other things related to this topic. So good morning, Dr. Barb. Say hi to everyone.
Hello, Dana, and hello, everybody watching. This is amazing. I'm so glad to be back with you, Dana. We've taken a few months of, time off here, and I am so passionate about our topic today that I think it's going to be news that every dog owner is going to want to hear.
Exactly.
Yeah. And for those of you who have not met me or do not know me, I am a holistic veterinarian in Northeast Iowa. Dana and I have been working together on these podcasts for a year now, maybe?
Maybe.
Yeah. And anyway, so what I do as a holistic veterinarian, or should I say maybe more of an integrative veterinarian, because there are emergency situations when conventional medicine is very much necessary. What I do is I put together a protocol for people who want a natural approach to medicine with their horses, their dogs, and their cats, and or companion animals. So if somebody is looking for a second opinion, or like I say, they want to get started with a natural approach, then I do a comprehensive private one-on-one consultation with people. And what that involves basically is getting all the medical records together, medications, supplements, treats, food. We go through everything related to it. Unlike a conventional veterinarian, when you walk in with maybe your dog has an ear infection, they'll look in the ear and say, yeah, it looks like a yeast infection. Sorry about that.
That's okay.
That's my phone.
We all have our lives.
But in those consultations, what differs, I guess I should say, from a conventional approach to a holistic approach is a holistic doctor looks at everything. It's not just a one size fits all. And I was using the example of taking a dog in with an ear infection. Your conventional veterinarian will probably look in the ear, maybe take a swab, look at it under the microscope, diagnose it as a combination bacterial yeast infection, prescribe a medication and maybe a steroid for the inflammation. Holistic doctors go through what's causing the ear infection. Is it anatomical, like a narrowed ear canal? Is it more of a it's dog swimming a lot, maybe it's on the wrong diet, because a lot of chronic ear infections are diet related. So we dig deep. So in a consultation, be prepared to answer a lot of questions that I ask you. And then I put together a protocol, and then we go from there and see how things progress.
Yep. And friends, you can still develop a relationship with Dr. Barb, even though she's not in your town. I mean, these phone or Zoom consultations are extremely beneficial, extremely thorough, and you can have a lot of follow-up as needed to really work through those issues. So because some of them are not a one call resolves all kind of thing. You need to dig and peel back layers and move through a variety of things. And she can offer you in many ways details about how to use essential oils, or maybe give you Chinese herbs or other remedies that just are not going to be made available to you anywhere, or that I, as a non-veterinarian kind of person, can't make those prescriptions. She can. So I encourage you, especially if you're struggling with something that seems to be recurring or has gotten into these very deep, complex levels, or you're just afraid of the diagnosis, reach out and get some additional holistic support.
Thanks, Dana.
So what's your website?
Right now, I'm in the process of reconstructing it, but so there's not a lot of detail on there, but I do have online courses on pet nutrition, and then how to use, like, a basic 101, how to use essential oils with dogs, cats, or horses. So there, I think, are 6 courses on there. I also have one that goes into a little more detail about the topic we're going to talk about. And that that mini course is called Vaccines. Are they your animal's friend or foe? And it's just a very short course. But anyway, barbfoxdvm.com.
Awesome.
So again, Barb Fox, D is in dog, V is in Victor, M is in Mary.com.
And it's worth it to make the phone call if you're worried about your pet. So today we're talking about vaccines. And this is one of the most common questions that I get about, Dana, do you vaccinate your dog? I don't want to vaccinate my dog. What should I be worried about? The vet says I have to, and there's a whole host of layers to this topic. So we're going to talk about with Dr. Barb about what vaccines are considered maybe in that core category that we have to do for the puppies. Do we need to do those as adult? Are things like Lyme vaccine appropriate for your pet, not just because your vet said it's part of the thing? And just really dig into those pieces of the puzzle and help you make smarter decisions for your pet, because it's not a one size fits everybody approach. So kick us off, Dr. Barb, with how we sort of work through this. And you know me, I always have a few questions to throw in at you. So we'll go from there.
Well, first of all, Dana, I'm just going to put a little disclaimer out here that I am not, and I may sound like I'm anti-vaccine. I am not anti-vax, but like you and I were just talking before we got on the recording, that we're both very discreet, very discretionary, I should say, on how we choose our vaccines for our animals. And one of the big problems I get is, I fill in at a conventional clinic because I can do my holistic treatments there 2 days a week. And a lot of times people come in and they're expecting just to do everything on that reminder card without question. And half the time people don't even know what some of the things on the reminder card that they get in the mail means. It's just a bunch of alphabet letters. And so they just think, well, because I was sent this reminder, I should do them.
Right.
Well, first of all, I believe in informed consent. That means that when you come in with your aging Labrador or any breed, does it really need to have Lyme, leptospirosis, kennel cough, canine influenza, you name it? Does it need all those vaccines? Does it need them every year? Does that dog need them every year? And I'm going to just say right now, absolutely not. And I'll explain why a little bit later in the presentation. But I think that informed consent is really important, because what we have to talk about is, are we over vaccinating? That's part of informed consent. Informed consent also means that if your dog is going to get this medical procedure called a vaccination, and it is a medical procedure, that we have to go over the risks versus the benefits of that vaccination.
Right.
There are very, very real risks, and I will get into that in more detail too. But informed consent means that your doctor should sit down with you and say, because of these medical issues, I would not, we should use some precautionary things here if you want to go ahead with this. Or I can say, if this were my dog, I probably would not do this, because for one thing, vaccines, what on the vaccine label that the doctors are supposed to read, it says for immunization of healthy animals only. So if you have this middle-aged dog or older dog, or even a younger dog that has, say, an autoimmune condition, it has some kind of cancerous lesion on it, it may have kidney disorders, it should not be vaccinated.
Right.
So this is what I mean by informed consent, but very few practices take the time to do that. And I think that a lot of veterinarians do not understand the risks versus the benefits. And another thing is, and I hate to say this, but it's vaccines are huge, huge moneymakers for the clinic. And I think a lot of veterinarians are scared to lose that revenue.
Yeah, I agree. And just to repeat what she just said, vaccine inserts, labels, and so on say for healthy dogs only. So you can and should push back on any veterinarian that is trying to say you must have these vaccines. If you know your dog has some sort of health concern, really push back, question it, and understand those risks that Dr. Barb is about to explain here.
Absolutely. Now, you mentioned, Dana, the core vaccines, and I don't think a lot of people know what a core vaccine is. So I'm going to go over what a non-core and a core vaccine would be.
Okay.
So core vaccines are diseases that most dogs would come in contact with or be exposed to over their lifetime. And that would be canine distemper, canine parvovirus, and canine adenovirus. Rabies is also a core vaccine, and that is one that's really difficult to get around because of the laws. Now, non-core would be your Lyme, your leptospirosis, canine influenza. What else am I missing here?
Bordetella is a common one.
Which one?
Bordetella.
Oh, yeah, the
I know
kennel
it's
cough.
not core, yeah.
And then there's also, the coronavirus, which is also usually a part of the distemper, adenovirus, parvo, and parainfluenza vaccine combo. So those are diseases, say, like if you've got a little teacup Yorkie that sits on grandma's lap all day and goes to the bathroom on a potty pad, does it need a Lyme vaccine? I would say not.
Yeah.
But a lot of veterinarians push everything under the sun for, like I said, the revenue, and they want to cover their liability, so that if little teacup Yorkie goes outside, brings a tick back in, and gets Lyme disease, which is very, very rare that would happen in that scenario, I think that veterinarians want to just say, we better be safe. But they don't understand the risks involved.
Right.
So, and Dana, this is really interesting too. When we're talking, I'm kind of going down maybe a little bit off path here, but I think we need to explain what a vaccine is designed to do.
Okay.
Vaccine was actually produced to prevent a disease that your dog would come in contact with. So the problem is, if it were just the modified live or recombinant vaccine, or even a killed vaccine that is mixed with purified water, or the antigen, I should say, back up. Let's say that we want to find a safe distemper vaccine. If we could attenuate or change that virus so it doesn't cause disease in the dog and mix it with some purified water and inject it, I think that'd be fine. But the problem is there are up to 22 different additives in these vaccines that cause reactions. And the biggest one is aluminum hydroxide. We know in people that aluminum causes problems with the mental cognition. It can actually go anywhere in the body and cause problems. So, and that's one thing. So, the big danger with repeated or annual vaccines is that you get an accumulation of these heavy metals and other components, even like formaldehyde, mercury. Thimerosal is used extensively as a preservative. And then you have your adjuvants, like I mentioned, the aluminum salts. We have, like polymyxin B, amphotericin, which are antibiotics and antifungals. All of these things are injected into our pets' bodies. And that's what causes the big problem, is that our animals get sickened by these other ingredients in the vaccines.
Right. And so, Dr. Barb, you did say it, and I was going to call that out, but when she was talking about aluminum and mercury, friends, we're into this heavy metal load, right? It's a heavy metal issue, which is sometimes why you hear me talk a lot about heavy metal detox. And we get them not only from vaccines, but from the world around us and other products that we're using. Is thimerosal a form of mercury?
Correct.
Yes. And so I've had people argue with me. I mean, argue hard. My vaccines are mercury free. And I'm like, no, they have thimerosal in them. And so it's really important that we start to understand the labeling changes that are happening or have happened that try to make it sound like something that it's not,
Well, there are some thimerosal free vaccines, but they are rare. Muriel I think they're Elanco now. I'm not sure. There's been so many takeovers of companies that I can't keep up with it. But Mariel Corporation makes, and I think they're still Mariel, they make a thimerosal-free rabies vaccine. And they have some other modified live vaccines and recombinant vaccines, which is, I don't want to get into all the details here because it's not what we're meant to talk about today, but they are out there, but they are more expensive. So a lot of times veterinarians will not carry them.
Right.
But you can look that up online, do your research, do your deep dives, your digging. You can find them.
What does it mean to have a modified live versus a killed vaccine?
So that's a good question, Dana. And I think that people need to understand this. So let's take rabies, for example. It is a killed vaccine. And unfortunately, it is usually killed with some chemical agent like formaldehyde or other ingredients. And what it does is it kills that virus. There's no living portion or no viable portion of that virus that can cause disease. The problem with a killed vaccine like rabies is it has to have some kind of boost to create a good immune response because it's killed and the body doesn't respond to it like they would a modified live. Now, a modified live virus is still a viable virus, meaning that is has some life force to it, but it has been changed with all this what they call this recombinant technology to make it not cause disease, but the body recognizes it more like what we call a natural challenge, which would be like your dog goes out, gets exposed to parvo, okay? And because the vaccine is, I lost my train of thought there. Let's say your dog goes out and gets exposed to parvo, and it's already been vaccinated, fully vaccinated for parvo, which is now a modified live vaccine. It's going to create a more natural response, antibodies response to that virus, and it's more effective than a killed vaccine. So that's the big difference.
Yeah. So in short, friends, when your dog gets vaccinated, they're putting some level of that active virus, either in live form or killed off form, to the body, and then the body forms an immune response that then starts to protect it against, or to know how to fight against that disease should it be presented again in real life. Yes.
Mm-hmm.
From simple Dana terms.
Yeah, right. Well, we want to keep it simple because immunology, it was a 2-hour course in vet school. It was the toughest course I took. It was because the immune system is so complicated. Yeah. So I try to break it down and keep it simple. So I think that your audience will be really interested to hear this though. Okay. So a virus can't replicate, it can't duplicate itself and make new baby viruses by itself. It has to get inside of a cell in the body. And so the immune system, what the immune system does, if it's working properly, it'll intercept these viruses before they get into the cell and neutralize that virus so it can't attach to the cell and get in. If the immune system isn't working, and then they call that sterile immunity, okay? And when we have sterile immunity, that means that we have a lot of these memory cells that hold this, neutralization for a very, very, very long time. So if the animal is exposed to parvo again, it doesn't get parvo because it's already accepting that. Now, if the immune system, like the antibodies are not there that we want to be in the body, and worst case scenario, that parvovirus gets in a cell and starts replicating, then we have another part of the immune system called the cellular immunity system that comes in and it will intercept and pretty much engulf that whole cell. Like we have a white cell called a macrophage that comes in. It's kind of like a Pac-Man, the old Pac-Man games where it's eating the little bubbles, the little yellow bubbles that you play. And this is what the T cells do. They come in and they intercept and they kind of like explode or implode that cell. And then the virus is killed, can't replicate anymore. So there are a lot of different parts of the immune system that work together. And those are the only, like if we talk about the antibodies and the T helper cells or T killer cells. Those are the two main areas of the immune system, but there's complement and there's cytokines and everything else that all plays a factor in this. So if we have a functioning immune system, there are a lot of diseases that animals can't get because they're going to be wiped out.
Yeah. Okay. So can we start with puppies? Maybe just go back and start with that core set of vaccines at puppyhood and see what you think about the schedule of vaccines and which ones are must-haves and so on.
Well, I think the core vaccines, which would be distemper, parvo, and adenovirus and rabies. I'm going to give you, not my opinion, but I'll give you Dr. Ron Schultz ideas on this. Now, he is retired, but he was chief of immunology at the vet school. He was a chief professor of immunology at the University of Wisconsin Vet School. And he came to our Young Living Conference, Animal Conference, I believe it was in 2016, and he was the keynote speaker and really told people what these things do. And then in private, he met with the speakers, and I was a speaker. We had 4 other ones. We went up to supper together, and he says, you know, guys, he says, I'll tell you what I do with my puppies. Because he was breeding, I don't even know what breed he had, but he was breeding some puppies or some of his dogs. And he said, I vaccinate my puppies for distemper, adenovirus, and parvovirus at 9, 12, and 15 weeks of age. And then I do the rabies at 18 to 22 weeks of age. He said, then I repeat that at the 1-year mark.
The whole series?
Yes.
That's part, okay.
Yeah. And then he says, then I run titers, which I'll explain what titers are in a minute. I run titers on my dogs, and he says, I've never had to revaccinate any of my dogs with that protocol. Now, a titer, for those of who don't know what that is T-I-T-E-R is the word. A titer is a blood test that you can draw on your dog to find out if it has mounted a proper immune response. In other words, it's going to check for antibodies against that disease that you're trying to protect your dog against. So when Dr. Schultz ran a yearly titer, or every 3 years, I'm not sure if he did every 3 or every year, but he never had to revaccinate because the antibodies were there. Now, what happens if we have this sterile immunity, because of the immune system working correctly? If we revaccinate and there's already protection there, for one thing, you clients out there, you pet parents are wasting your money, but you're also injecting more of those toxic ingredients into your animal, your dog, every year. So this is the big thing, is titers can be a godsend.
So you just triggered a thought that I've never thought about you got my head spinning. Really? No. So if a dog is producing antibodies, we know that there's all this other stuff in the vaccine that's the problem. Adding more vaccine for parvo, for example, or for rabies does really nothing to increase their ability to protect against that disease. Correct. The only real factor in that moment is the added load of all the other crap, all the other junk that is a burden on the body that it doesn't know how to deal with. Correct. And to expel.
Right.
Okay. So wow, that's a different way of looking at that for me. Okay, interesting. Thank you.
You're welcome.
So why is titers so expensive in most vet offices? My titer, when I had Poppy titered a couple of weeks ago, it was $50 for everything. And I have clients telling me that it's cost prohibitive to even consider titers in their local vet's offices. Do you know why that would be? Or a theory?
It depends on where the veterinarian is sending the titer into. For example, if they're sending it to like Kansas State University or to the University of Wisconsin, I think it's fairly reasonable. But if they do IDEX or any of their other in-house laboratory testing, they charge. I know the IDEX charges quite a bit. And then we
That's
have
what he did it right on the spot. He had little thing and it triggered colors or not, whether there was antibodies there or not. I think they were pink. And so he did it right in house, but mine was $50.
That makes sense, Dana. There are two titer tests that we do. One is a quantitative assay, meaning that's the one we send out to a specialized lab, and they actually give you a number, like how many antibodies per milliliter or volume of fluid is in there. The one that you're talking about is what we call the yes/no test, and it's an in-clinic, it's rapid, like less than 20 minutes. And it gives you a color change, like there's a control color. And if the animal or the dog has adequate antibodies, it won't change. It'll just be the control color. But if it's over that, it'll be a darker color change. If there is no or very little color change, that is, a subnormal level of antibodies, or zero, like you said with Poppy. And so that can tell you rapidly without having to go to the other expense of doing that. So like I said, there's the two tests. So it depends. When you got the rapid one, I know what the cost is on those. And so your veterinarian was really nice about not marking that up a lot. Okay. But that is beautiful because it gives the client or the pet owner, the option of, do I vaccinate or should I just not vaccinate, and not just having to do the perfunctory vaccine, the mandatory vaccine every year or every 3 years or whatever. Like Dr. Schultz said, I've never had to revaccinate my animals. So
why would a dog, and I wish I fell into that category, but when we had Poppy titered, she showed no antibodies for distemper now at 7.5 years old. Why might that? I know we don't know for sure, but why might that happen?
Okay, so they, on this website that I looked at, about 1 in 5,000 dogs are just genetically incapable of mounting an immune response to the vaccine. So certain breeds, certain family lines, it's a genetic disorder, I guess. And the other thing is, if an animal has some other kind of underlying medical condition where the immune system is already compromised, they're just not going to mount a response to that. So it's kind of a catch-22 because they usually recommend vaccination if the titer is 0 or very low. But if the dog hasn't responded, how are they going to respond to another vaccine? It's kind of a crazy thing. But anything that we can do to support the immune system, and I know that you do a tremendous job with your nutrition and supplements and essential oils. So I wouldn't consider anything you're doing is hindering, Poppy's response to that.
No, I didn't think that. I thought maybe could they just stop being produced, or was it that she never had them to begin with, really?
Well, that's a catch-22. That's the $1 million question, is what came first.
Right, because we know not all vaccines are 100% effective. And I think I've heard a number like for rabies that it's only something like 88% effective, or I don't know the number. I think that number's in my head, but I might be off a little bit. So yeah. So about the titers, if you produce any antibodies, so I sometimes hear people say, I got a high number or I got a low number, and it was low, so I boosted. But that's not really how that works. You either produce or you don't, correct?
Correct. That's how Dr. Schultz explained it to our group. And it depends on what you read, what research you dive into, because I have a very, competing types of information.
Sure.
So they say that, like, the reason that they can't titer lepto, they can't titer Lyme or influenza, anything like that, is because there has been no set numbers for those vaccines. Now, why they can do that with distemper, adenovirus, and parvo, I don't know, but it's really confusing. I would just say that I would trust a titer test that has some antibody response to it, because just like with anything else, that immune system can fluctuate. And maybe the dog, if it was exposed to one of those viruses and it still has some circulating antibodies, as indicated by the titer test, then the animal is going to mount a huge response to that exposure. And then if you did another titer test, maybe a week later, you might have sky high antibodies to that. So I just think there's a lot of things we don't know about that yet.
Yeah. So back to our puppies. And I'm sorry, I'm the queen of going down roads. But back to the puppies, it's 9, 12, and 15 for parvo distemper. 18 to 22 weeks for rabies, and then do that whole cycle again at 1 year.
Correct. That's what is recommended. The reason that he doesn't like most of the recommendations are puppies less than 8 weeks of old should never be vaccinated. And this is why. The mother's antibodies that the puppies got through the milk, provided the mother was properly vaccinated, are going to transfer through the colostrum and into the puppy. So for the first several weeks of life, that puppy is protected 100% by the mom's antibodies. Now, as those antibodies start to wane or fade out, then the puppy starts making its own antibodies. But there is this window of what they call vulnerability that takes place, that when the puppies don't have any protection, and that is why we start vaccinating, and then we do the boosters, usually 3 boosters, so that we make sure that that puppy, one of those vaccines took, and the puppy's making antibodies in response to that vaccination.
Okay.
Sometimes the mom's antibodies can stay in the body for 12 to 13, maybe 14 weeks. And that's why we go through that 15 to 16 week age, so that we're making sure that the puppy is protected.
What would you do if you had an unhealthy puppy? Meaning they've come into the world, they're sort of sick straight out of the gate with something, and you're trying to get them eating properly. Would you delay any of those, or would you just go ahead?
Absolutely, because if they're, just like I said earlier, vaccines are intended for healthy animals only. So it's going to, for one thing, it could make that puppy sicker because of the stress that the vaccine is causing on the immune system, because that's what happens. When a puppy is, or any dog is vaccinated, it causes a suppression of the immune system at first because it's just overworking. And then we get this surge, maybe 2 weeks later. And so we've got this up and down with that immune system. And this is where animals can get sicker if they're vaccinated when they're ill.
Mm-hmm. And so, friends, just to clarify, those vaccines are not given at any other action, meaning not under a surgical procedure. Rabies is not given at the same time as any other vaccine. There is a separation of space of weeks between the administration of any vaccines that you're delivering and a separation of any other medical procedure.
That is very true, Dana. The thing is, if your dog is under anesthesia, then if a vaccine is given and there is a serious reaction to it, it can kill that animal. And we would never know because we're not seeing any symptoms. The animal's under anesthesia. Mm-hmm. So yeah, it's great to have. I know that the clinic that I work in part-time, I don't do any of the surgeries, but the practice owner does all the surgeries. And they will make sure that the animal gets its final vaccines at the surgical recheck, which is a week or 2 after the surgery.
So, this leads me to think a lot about the rescue dogs that go into shelter as an owner surrender with no documentation. or the stray that they find somewhere. And I get it. I understand the need to vaccinate these dogs because you don't know, but that whole throw them in for the core vaccines, rabies at the same time, which is a core, but all at the same time, along with getting them spayed and neutered straight away, that's a whole big burden on the body, a whole big burden. And so if it can be spaced out and we do some detox work for the vaccines and support the aftercare of the surgery holistically, which is totally doable, then I think we're setting that dog up to a healthier way forward.
Absolutely. And unfortunately, with those rescue or the shelter dogs, without having any documentation of what they've had, it is very difficult because they're in a shelter, they're stressful, they're probably not getting the best diet, and disease will take over rampantly.
Mm-hmm.
That's a real tough one. We talked about that a little bit. The problem is if we give the combo, the 5-way combo, which would be distemper, adenovirus, parvo, parainfluenza, and coronavirus, and then we add the 4-way lepto to that, we have a 9-way shot. We have 9 components going in all at one time. First of all, if the dog has a reaction to the vaccine, we don't know which component actually did it. Now, the lepto is the most reactive one of any of the shots. Maybe rabies would be a close second to that, but the biggest majority, and this also comes from Dr. Ron Schultz, that says that the lepto is the worst one for reactivity. So if we split those up, here are the pros and the cons. It's going to cost you more because you're going to make 3 office visits versus 1 office visit. And I have a lot of clients that insist that I do all the vaccines on that day, and I've actually had to refuse to. If I lose the client, I don't care because I'm looking out for the animal's best welfare. Mm-hmm. Rabies, and here, I'll tell you a little story because I love stories. I think that really hits home. Several years ago, I had a consulting client. She was close enough that I was doing some house calls in addition to doing some telephone calls with her. They had an 11-year-old beagle that had rabies, Lyme, Bordetella, cattle cough, distemper, adenovirus, and parvo, and the 4-way lepto, all in the same day, on the same location at the base of the neck. 2 weeks later, the dog is tremoring, having little mini seizures, lost its motor function in the hind legs, and was basically a mess, a hot mess. Mm-hmm. They took this dog, this is before I saw it, they took the dog up to the University of Wisconsin, had $3,000 worth of tests done, and could not find anything except a little fluid at the base of the cerebellum. That is the part of the brain that functions with coordination. So I didn't put 2 and 2 together right away. And we're looking, of course, at all the other things that could have happened. And then it just, the light bulb goes off. And I said, when did Max have his last vaccinations? Well, it would have been in November. And this happened, he started showing symptoms November 15th of that year. And I said, guys, I can't prove this, but I think Max is having vaccinosis issues. And this is very common. I've seen it over and over and over again, but you cannot get mainstream medicine, veterinary medicine, to put this correlation together.
Right.
They say, no, vaccines are fine. They're not doing that. But when you see it and then you start paying more attention to it, it happens a lot. Now that client, if she had known any differently, she was just, doesn't know. Because her veterinarian said, yes, safe to give all these vaccines at one time. Then if she wanted to have the rabies, let's do the rabies separately from everything else. We can, and here again, Dana, this is the tough part. Most veterinarian clinics are not going to carry just distemper, just parvo, or just adenovirus.
Right.
But you can't get a distemper parvo combination. It would be wise to do that at one visit And then if any of the non-core vaccines, say like they're in Wisconsin, extremely exposed to Lyme, then they could, if they chose the Lyme, they could do that at a separate visit. But you've got 3 or 4 visits here. And I don't know, at the office visit where I work at, $63. So a lot of people are going to say, well, I'm not going to spend an extra $240 to do that. And they're just going to say, give it all at once. And so then we increase that risk of vaccinosis.
Mm-hmm. We'll come back to talk about what to do about vaccinosis in another podcast, but because that's a whole nother topic.
Yeah.
Okay, so we've got the schedule for the core vaccines for puppies, and then those rescues that we have no idea whether they've been vaccinated or not. What about the non-core? Should we get a Lyme? Should we get a lepto? Who should, who shouldn't? What are the risks? That sort of thing.
Okay, so going back to our example, the little teacup Yorkie that goes on a potty pad in the house, I would say that little dog doesn't need any vaccines at all. If it's not going to grooming, boarding facilities, it has no exposure to other dogs. And I had this conversation, real life conversation with a client a couple of weeks ago. She was doing all these vaccines, or going to do all these vaccines. And I said, you know, he doesn't go outside. He never goes outside. Why would he need all these vaccines? And then you could kind of see the gears turning, and she got it. And finally, thank goodness for the little dog she had, didn't have to do that. Let's say we've got the Labrador, the working lab that is a duck hunter, or we've got the coonhound. They're becoming, the labs are in stagnant ponds and lakes and stuff where there could be, some nasty stuff, lepto especially. It might be warranted to, vaccinate for lepto if a dog is going to be in stagnant water or around coons and possums and that kind of thing. The problem with the lepto, though, is that there's at least 12 different serovars or strains of lepto, and the vaccine only covers 4. So then it's a gamble, Art.
Mm-hmm.
And honestly, in 28 and a half years of practice, I've seen probably less than a handful of cases of lepto. Of all the dogs and cats, and I shouldn't say cats, all the dogs I've seen. And so that might be something that you'd have to talk to your veterinarian about.
Is lepto treatable? I've heard that it is if you catch the symptoms early enough. Is that true?
Yeah. It is. It's a difficult one though, because usually by the time that you are seeing any symptoms, the kidneys are 85% shot. It causes kidney failure, and liver failure, but the kidneys go first. So a lot of these dogs come in what looks like a UTI, put them on an antibiotic, send them home, and then they come back. They're drinking a lot of water, they're having accidents, you run blood work, the kidneys are affected. And fortunately, there's a new test. I don't know if you've heard of it or not, called the SDMA test, SDMA. Mm-hmm. It is an early indicator of kidney function before the BUN and creatinine rises. And the BUN and creatinine are 2 enzymes that we routinely check for kidney failure. But for that BUN and creatinine simultaneously to be raised, a great majority, 70 to 80% of the kidney function is already gone.
Wow.
So and so if it was suspected that a dog came in contact with wildlife that may be carrying lepto or drinking out of stagnant puddles or ponds, then the SDMA test could help it. And then we could use a combination of integrative, I should say a combination of natural and conventional treatments to get that dog over the lepto. Mm-hmm. But typically it doesn't work that way, and because it's too far advanced by the time we see it.
I once heard that the lepto vaccine, even though it's like an annual vaccine, doesn't last a whole year, that it's only like 8 or 9 months.
6 months, I've heard.
Wow. So you get the vaccine, but you still only get less than a year. So then why are they not suggesting it more frequently? Not that I want our dogs to have it, but what's the theory behind that? Do you know?
I have no idea.
Okay.
Really don't.
Okay. What about Lyme?
Okay, that's a great question, because this is my take on it, is that there are at least 4 different, maybe 5, 6, there could be a gazillion different tick diseases out there. We really don't know the whole gamut. But the common ones are anaplasmosis, ehrlichiosis, and Lyme disease. And that is what we do when we have that combination heartworm tick test. That's what it's checking for, is the 3 main tick diseases. But we also have babesiosis. We have Rocky Mountain spotted fever. Bartonella is another tick-borne kind of a spirochete type of organism that, so a tick bites your dog and we're only vaccinating for Lyme, it still can get all those other tick diseases. So the Lyme, you mentioned efficacy of vaccines before, Dana, and the Lyme only has, depending on the type of technology behind this Lyme vaccine, anywhere from 60 to 85% efficacy. The other thing is that when you use these flea and tick products, that especially the oral products, 9 times out of 10, the tick still has to bite and attach for that tick to get the chemical in it to kill it. And even though they've said that it takes up to 72 hours for a tick being attached to transmit that disease, I don't buy into that at all. I think it can happen immediately. So then you still risk having your dog get Lyme disease or any of the other tick diseases. So going back to Lyme vaccine, in a real heavy tick endemic area, if you're living along like the Mississippi, up in Minnesota, even in here, Northeast Iowa, we see a lot of it, of Lyme disease. But I still think that the basic thing we need to think about is the good diet, the support of the immune system through supplements, essential oils, homeopathics, herbals, whatever. Because not every dog that gets exposed to Lyme disease is going to get Lyme disease. It all depends on that, going back to the core things we talked about, right?
I'm aware of a tick bite tincture that's made from homeopathic remedies. And I'm sorry, I should have thought about this ahead of time, but I didn't. But you know, Paula Vandervoort, she sells it in her breeder store. What does that do? I mean, I know what homeopathies do, but I'm just curious to help our people understand. And do you think that that works in most cases?
Well, I know another practitioner, I'll just call her Dr. Ann because I don't have permission to share her name. She does hair analysis and then does some muscle testing, and she's got some expensive software programs that she makes tinctures like that too. It works very, very well, but she makes hers on a customized basis based on the hair analysis and other things that are going on with that animal. And she does it for people too. So basically a homeopathic remedy is something that will stimulate the body's own immune defenses to kick in the gear. That's the easiest, simplest way I can explain it.
Yep. And homeopathies are basically made from the disease, right? To help the body go, oh, foreign, let me fight back. And it's much like what a vaccine would do, but it's from a natural approach without all that other junk in the process. So I am a firm believer in the homeopathic remedies and essential oils and Chinese herbs and all that jazz. I have a bottle of that tick bite remedy in my first aid kit. Knock on wood. We've never been exposed to ticks around here. The only time I found a tick in the last, I don't know, 7 years was on me. And it was just in my hair, so I wasn't real worried about it. But yeah, my dogs have never had any. So, and again, important note for people, the products that we've been begging you to stop using, especially those isoxazoline products, they don't prevent your animal from being bit by the flea or the tick. They don't prevent it. And so that's an important notion to start to understand.
Right. Hey, Dina, I have some notes here. I just wanted to share what ingredients you might find in your animal vaccines.
Okay. Great.
Okay. So we talked about aluminum salts, but there's also squalene, which is a very toxic chemical. lipopolysaccharides, different types of sugars like sucrose and so on. Then we have the mercury products, which is the thimerosal. We can have antibiotics like gentamicin, and gentamicin is a very toxic antibiotic. You have to be very careful with that. Neomycin, polymyxin B, phenoxyethanol. I don't know why that would be in there, but here again, we have ethanol in here. And then formaldehyde as an attenuating agent and a preservative. And how they grow the vaccines or the virus for the vaccine is with foreign animal tissue.
Yes.
So you can have different animals. I know that the recombinant vaccine that Muriel makes is from monkeys.
Oh, geez, Louise.
Yeah. So checking the skin, and then we can have cow serum in there, chick embryo, human fetal lung tissue. Not to gross everybody out, but human fetal lung tissue. It's aborted babies.
Yeah, and the cow chicken thing is part of why we often see allergies to chicken and to beef products or eggs.
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
Insect proteins, fungicides, and antimicrobials like phenols, and here again, formaldehyde is on that same list. Buffering agents like glycerol, sorbitol, sucrose, salts, and borax. Stabilizers, surfactants. Surfactant is what makes it stick together. Permeability enhancers like polysorbate 80. It's also very toxic. And then contaminants from like GMO-fed animals. Glyphosate can be found in the vaccines. And insect viruses. Oh my gosh. And so this website, I pulled this off, said there is no biosystem that uses heavy metal aluminum, absolutely none. So their whole thing was like once the aluminum is inside the body, it's very, very, very difficult to remove. We know that. The aluminum adjuvant turns on the immune system, and it's done in a very non-selective way, meaning very random. So that makes the immunity last longer. But we think that these reactions are benign and they're just chalked up to allergies. And then after the aluminum causes the damage locally, it goes to the brain, spleen, muscles, bone, liver, and heart. And there it stimulates the immune system by presenting the virus antigens repeatedly. So it acts as an antigen by itself, actually, like a self-antigen. And so it keeps that immune system on forever. And that's what causes it's an acronym called ASIA, stands for autoimmune inflammatory syndrome induced by adjuvants. Now that is the first time I'd heard of that. And if you guys want to dig deeper, do your own research, I pulled that off of, it was a research article on Dogs Naturally magazine. So the website is dogsnaturallymagazine.com. And the article was called "What Harmful Ingredients Are in Your Dog's Vaccines."
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Yeah. That's
That's scary stuff, right? I mean, again, I don't think you or I are anti-vax. We are anti-overdoing it. We are pro spread it out. Don't do it with anything else. Know your risk, right? A coonhound and a Yorkie have very different risk for lepto, right? And really start to understand those things and make decisions wisely about whether you need that particular vaccine or not, whether you need it every year, and whether you're willing to play the risk of, if I am exposed, what are my options to actual contraction of that disease and or treatment of.
And I know that a lot of the rebuttals that I get is I can't take my dog to doggy daycare. I can't take my dog to the groomer. I can't take it boarding without vaccines. Here's what I would do, and I'm probably sticking my foot way down my throat, but
okay. Careful.
Yeah, but I would find something that your veterinarian could write a medical exemption to that facility before.
Mhm.
So your dog's breaking out in allergies and it's on some kind of allergy medicine. There's a reason not to vaccinate big time. If your dog has a seasonal cough, if your dog is in early heart failure, I don't care what it is. If there's something that you can justify having them write a medical exemption for, then it will be up to the facility to accept it or not.
Right.
Okay.
Or find a friend that you can have a fenced in play date in their backyard, right? I mean, there's a lot of, there's even places around here now popping up where you can rent somebody's fenced in backyard for an hour at a time. Mhm. If I weren't in an HOA, I would totally be doing that. And I'm considering my options for maybe a storefront for my business. And I may look at it being some house somewhere that I can convert that has a fenced in backyard that we can do exactly that. So there are a lot of ways to do different things, but yeah, really start to think about all of this. And, you know, I know for Poppy, I don't take her to dog parks. That led me to a question going back to the puppies. This notion of not putting puppies on the ground until they've had all their boosters. How do you feel about that?
If they're exposed to parvo, I would have a problem with that because parvo is a very, very infectious disease and it causes a lot of death. I mean,
but if they're vaccinated, are we not confident in their protection, or at least somewhat confident in their protection? I know everything's not 100%, but.
Well, let's say they're at the 12-week age. They've only had one parvo shot, and then you take it to the dog park and possibly get it exposed. I would have a little bit of a problem with that.
But I wouldn't take it to the dog park, but I might put it on the ground in my apartment complex. Would you? I mean, I have clients that they literally will not put their puppy on the ground anywhere until it's like, I don't know, 4 months old.
Oh gosh.
And
Yeah,
we're missing so much socialization and experience and development phase that these puppies, when they get to me, they're a hot mess because they don't know how to put their feet on the ground, you know, except in their little backyard.
Yeah, I would say that's a little overkill. That would be a little overkill. So, but a very young puppy that hasn't been exposed to a lot, you know, wait a few weeks anyway. Just it takes anywhere from 7 to 10 days for the immune system to mount any kind of good response from a vaccine the first time anyway.
Yeah. Okay. Fair enough.
Yeah.
All right. I think that's all my questions. This has been really helpful, and I always come away learning something that I did not know. So is there anything else on your note list that you wanted to share with us?
Yeah, I would say if you feel bullied or pressured strongly from your veterinarian to do things that you feel strongly against, I'd find another veterinarian.
Absolutely.
There's no reason for any doctor, human doctor or animal doctor, to push or bully or to make somebody feel intimidated or even worse, you know, because you're not doing everything that they recommend. Ask questions and do your research. Don't just take it for face value that everything on that card is necessary. And then, like I said, you can go onto dogsnaturally.com magazine and look at, or magazine.com, and look at all of the things that I talked about as far as on the ingredient list of these vaccines. You may have to dig a little deep. It's not always there out in front of you, but because a lot of it is censored, and that's on purpose too. But those are just my thoughts. Just if you feel strongly about something, make sure that you're not going to be walked over or intimidated about. Okay.
Sounds good. All right. Thank you. So friends, if you need support by telemedicine, Dr. Barb again is barbfoxdvm.com, and you can schedule an appointment with her to review your dog's case history and come up with a new strategy that integrates holistic medicine into traditional medicine. If they need to work together, then she can totally do that to help you out. So have a great day, everybody, and hope you learned something to take away and keep your dog healthy.